All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. This is the second webinar in our Field of Fork webinar series focused on turkey hunting. I'm really excited about this webinar tonight, and I hope that you are too. I hope that you brought along a turkey call with you to either ask questions about or practice with tonight. So this information that we are presenting is geared towards folks who have very little to no hunting background. So we just want to let you know that if you have never been turkey hunting before, then this is the webinar for you. If you've never picked up a call before, if you don't own one yet, this is the perfect place to start. So welcome. If you're joining us on Zoom and you have questions along the way, drop them in the chat for us, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. And we ask that you just remain on mute until we get to the question and answer section as well. All right, so, and I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Becky Wallen, and I'm the Field of Fork Coordinator for the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. But I am just the host tonight, so I'm going to let our guest instructor introduce himself. So go ahead, Field.
Well, I appreciate it, Becky. So hang on, let me change. My name is Field Hudnall, and just to give you a little bit of background information about myself. I've been in the game call making business for about 23 years. I started out working at a Dick's Sporting Goods years ago, and I automatically was drawn to the call section of the store. And I've been a call maker for about 19 years. And my thing is absolutely, I love hunting anything that you can call. It doesn't matter if it's turkeys, waterfowl, elk, coyotes. I love communicating with anything that you can call. So a little bit of background information about myself. I started out loving waterfowl hunting. My dad took me and my brother duck hunting when I was 8 years old. That's where I got drawn to it. I didn't start out turkey hunting at a young age. That didn't actually come till later, a little bit later. I was 14 when I started. But all I ever wanted to do was anything with the hunting industry, whether it be running a video camera, building calls, tuning calls, and I've been very fortunate that that's been my entire life course. I used to guide waterfowl hunts in Northwest Texas when I was going to school, and that would help kind of pay for college. From there, I moved to Dayton, just outside of Dayton, Ohio, and I worked for a company called Zinc Calls for 8 years, doing call production, video production. And then I've also worked for a company called Avery and Greenhead Gear, doing video production. I was there in the very early stages of when they started building their waterfowl decoy line, their turkey decoy line. I was very fortunate to, so I really took to the waterfowl side of things early on. As a kid, all I wanted to do was hunt and fish. I played sports, but I wasn't very good at sports, not at all. But I had a knack for duck and goose calling, and then later, turkey calling. But I was very fortunate at a fairly young age to win the World Goose Calling Championship twice. I won the International Goose Calling Championship twice, the World Live Duck Calling Championship, as well as a number of other calling contests. I hosted Ducks Unlimited Television for 6 years. So between work with the companies, hosting DUTV, I've been very fortunate to travel and meet some very amazing people. I've hunted in over 33 different states, 5 Canadian provinces, and 3 countries, I guess. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because I'm only 40 years old. That's not that old. To some it might be old, but I look at it, I still got, hopefully the better half of my life left. But I've been very fortunate and blessed to meet some very amazing hunters, people that I truly look at as experts. I don't consider myself really an expert in anything. I'm a student, of hunting and a student of calling. But I've been very fortunate to meet some amazing people, and I'm a good listener. I like to listen more than I actually like to talk, to be honest with you. So currently right now, I own Field Proven Calls. That's my, my full-time job, and along with, I'm part of an organization called Homegrown Experience, and we document hunts and tell stories, unique stories. So between Field Proven Calls, Homegrown Experience, and also work with a lot of, well, it's not a lot, a select number of companies that we believe in their products, like Yeti Coolers, Apex Ammunition. We help with product development, product testing. So I'm very fortunate and blessed that every single day I get to blow a duck call, blow a goose call, run a turkey call, build a call, or talk hunting. So I'm very, and I love these. I love events like this. Um, I'm at the point in my life right now. I love sharing experiences. I love taking people hunting. I love calling. Being able to call for other people. I've got two boys. I've got a 5-year-old and a 8-year-old. They go hunting with me now. And actually, I've got a short little video clip I'll show you. But so that's kind of my background experience. I'm not I'll never call myself an expert in turkey hunting, but I've been very fortunate to be, pretty successful in it. And in fact, it's hard for me to think straight because on the 19th, I'll be heading to Florida for the second time to go after Osceolas. So I love turkey hunting. I've built my business off waterfowl, but if I could spring turkey hunt every day of the year, I would do it without a doubt. It's the most adrenaline rush experience I've ever had. And I truly believe because it's the calling side of it that I really like. So kind of moving forward a little bit, the reason I love turkey hunting again is because of the calling side of it. I truly feel that as a caller, and when you become a caller and you learn to call, there's so much more to the hunt that you personally get to enjoy. You get to, hang on one second, sorry about that. There we go. There's so many more parts of the hunt that you get to enjoy because it's not the harvest that you really judge the hunt off of. I've had hunts where I go out and I get to hear turkeys and you get to communicate with them. They answer you, they come in, you're playing that game of chess. And even though you may not harvest that bird, the hunt itself is a success because you get that adrenaline, that emotional roller coaster of highs and lows of, the bird's answering you, then he's not answering you, then he's coming to you, or he gets locked up and the hunt doesn't pan out. That is why I truly love turkey hunting. Because once you pull the trigger, it's done. That hunt is over. And yes, you get that bird, you get, that's the final prize. But the entire journey to that prize is what it's, in my opinion, what it's really all about. And I love sharing and getting people to really experience the magic of calling wildlife. When you can go into the woods and you make that call and you're in, that animals, whether it's an elk or a coyote or waterfowl or turkey, when you're in their environment and you can convince them, you're speaking their language to come to you, to me, that is the ultimate outdoor experience. So, and the other thing is calling, it's a skill set that money cannot buy. All right. Yes, you can buy the calls, but you still have to learn to operate those calls. And that skill set is only achieved through practice and the desire to want to get better. And it's one of the skill sets that truly, the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And the more you progress and understanding, the skill set of calling, understanding how to properly use those tools, the reward is then greater. You can call those birds closer to you. You can, that game of chess becomes more exciting. So that's why I really, the calling is something that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. And it's not overly complicated. And I love that we're talking about the basics because really the basics is all that matters. Okay. So typically when we do this in person, we can do questions immediately as soon as they pop up. But the way we're doing it now, I guess, questions are going to be kind of pushed till the end. But when you talk about calling turkeys, the first thing you need to understand is basic psychology of turkeys. Okay. You need to understand kind of what's going on when we're out there in the woods. All right. Because again, the actual calling part of it is very basic. We could cover how to the 4 different sounds and how to run those sounds in less than 5 minutes. But to really apply those sounds, you want to understand, you want to make sure you understand what you're saying to those birds. So first we have to understand kind of the psychology of what these birds are doing in springtime. So the state of Kentucky, and really all across the map, the season dates are set for the springtime, which is the breeding periods for spring turkeys. You've got your gobblers and your hens. The males are the gobblers. The hens are obviously the females. The gobblers are gobbling and they're strutting, and what they're doing is they're basically courting the hens. The hens are, when that gobbler sounds off and he's out in that field or in the woods strutting, he is trying to attract the hens to him. Okay. Which is kind of unusual because in nature, most of the time the hens are going to the gobbler. All right. But as turkey hunters, we're trying to reverse that process, and we want that gobbler to come to us because most of the time we're imitating a hen turkey. So during the springtime, this is like the rut for whitetails. All right. These turkeys are doing things that they normally don't do the rest of the year. In the springtime is really the only time that you'll drive down the road and you're going to see a gobbler just strutting out in the middle of a field for, he might be by himself. He's literally just strutting, trying to attract a hen to him. You're going to hear more vocalizations in the springtime than you will any other time of year. It is that is their rut. Okay. And that's why we're able to be as successful as we are, because these birds are so vocal and they do things that they normally don't do the rest of the time of the year. Okay. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So turkeys, the gobbler typically is going to start out on the roost in the morning. First thing in the morning, all turkeys roost up in the trees away from predators. Okay. So the first vocalizations you're going to hear in the morning, whether you make a call or not, is you're going to hear those turkeys gobbling on the roost. The hens are going to start carrying on. And that's the beginning of the courting process. That gobbler is sounding off because he wants all those hens in the area to know where he's at. And then the hens are calling. Okay. And then right a little bit past daylight, they're going to pitch down to the ground. And that's when the game starts. All right. That is, the chess game has officially started at that point. And us as hunters, it's so important because every day is different. It's important to try to understand what these birds are thinking. All right. This is the fun part of turkey hunting. You're trying to get in their heads. So how vocal is that bird on the roost? Is he that vocal? Is he answering other hens? When he pitches down, does he immediately shut up or does he continue to gobble? That's all information that we're going to take into account when we actually start calling to these birds. Okay. Other psychology of turkeys. Humans we have mastered, let me rephrase that. We have figured out how to use wild game's weaknesses against them. All right. To the full potential. Companies create products, they market those products, and they are very effective in turning the playing field in our favor for chasing wildlife. Okay. Turkey hunting is no different. The first turkey call is dated back to, I think it's like 6,500 years ago. Wing bone yelpers. The Indians figured out a way to take bones from the wing, and they made instruments to mimic these turkey sounds. Okay, so turkey calling has been around basically 6,500 years. But us as humans and our desire to grow and get better at the pursuits that we're going after, we've created camouflage. We've created different types of artificial turkey calls. We've created decoys. We've created ground blinds. We've created techniques on pursuing these birds that really exploit these turkeys' weaknesses. Okay. There's a common phrase out there that people say, and I know I'm I'm stirring up a hornet's nest here. A common term you're going to hear is, if a turkey could smell, you'd never be able to kill him. I personally believe that is the furthest thing from the truth. Okay, because turkeys have amazing eyesight. They have great hearing. To say if they could smell means says you wouldn't be able to kill them. Well, let's look at the coyote. The coyote, in my opinion, the coyote and the bobcat are apex predators. They can see very well. They can hear very well, and their nose is amazing. And we're still able to harvest them. Okay. Now, turkeys, they have amazing sight and amazing hearing, but the way they process information, they are not the sharpest tools in the shed. Okay. They are great at being scared of everything, which makes them very random and very difficult to predict. All right. But humans, again, we know that they have amazing eyesight. So through the development of products, ground blinds. Ground blinds are a very effective way to set up in the middle of a field. Yes, that gobbler can see you, but that gobbler does not recognize, he's not processing that ground blind as danger. Deer do. That method of hunting turkeys does not work with mature whitetails. So through ground blinds, and then also strutting decoys. Strutting decoys have not been around really that long. So you could actually go out with a ground blind and a strutter decoy and never even pack a turkey call, and you could have a gobbler potentially run into within 15 yards or closer, and you could harvest that bird. All right. That's not my favorite way of pursuing them. I love the challenge of that game of chess of run and gun. Run and gun is a term that basically you're not using any ground blinds. Sometimes you don't use most of the time you don't use decoys, and it's strictly walking through the hardwoods, trying to locate that bird. You sit down and then you try to convince that bird to come to you. Okay. So the reason I'm explaining all of this is the other magical part of turkey hunting is you can make it what you want. All right. I don't prefer to hunt them out of a ground blind, but I'll never say that I won't, because last year I hunted out of a ground blind quite a bit, because ground blinds, they're very effective. And I got to share the blind with my 5-year-old and my, he was 4 last year, my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old and my wife were all in a blind together. So that's an amazing experience I got to share with my family, which that never, ever would have happened running and gunning, just sitting against a tree with no decoy. Okay. I kind of explained turkey hunting like I'm a cat fisherman. I love catfishing. I love all types of catfishing. Okay. I'm not a purist in any shape or form. I love riding and reeling for catfish. I love trot lines. I love bank poles. I love limb lines. And hopefully in June, I'm going to go noodling for the first time. So catfishing, there's a lot of different ways you can enjoy the sport. It's the same thing with turkey hunting. All right. You can make turkey hunting whatever you want it to be. If you enjoy sitting in a chair in a ground blind, comfortable, sipping on coffee and sharing, talking with your friends and waiting for those birds to come to you, that's great. That's absolutely run with it. But if you love that game of chess where you're, slipping through the woods and you're calling and that bird's answering back to you and you're talking to him and you're making moves every 50, 25 yards, that's a completely different experience as well. And it's also amazing. But just always keep in mind that the calling side of things is the call is a tool. It's a tool, no different. It's no different than anything else you're going to use. And understanding how to use that tool is going to make you a much more successful hunter, because I promise you there's a time to call and there's a time not to call. All right. So let's see if there's so turkey psychology. So one last thing that I want to stress. Now, this really has nothing to do with calling, but from my experiences of everything I've ever hunted, waterfowl, elk, deer, coyotes, turkeys, it doesn't matter. There's one thing you always need to remember. Our weakest point, the thing that spoils the hunt most of the time is movement. All right. This has nothing to do with calling, but I promise you, the reason turkeys have the reputation that they do, the reason that they have that, if they could smell, you wouldn't be able to kill them. That's their deal, is because they are so good at picking up on movement. Coyotes are too, waterfowl, deer. You can sit there and they can see you, but when you don't move, they can't really process what you are. But movement is how they detect predators. Okay. If any of y'all are deer hunters, if you've ever sat in a tree stand and fall and you've got a bunch of turkeys walking under you, if you're sitting there still, those turkeys are looking up in the sky. Turkeys are scared of everything. Since they were hatched, everything has tried to eat them. Everything from the air, the ground, they have been on the menu of everything, and they are so good at avoiding predators. But if you've ever deer hunted and you sat in a tree stand, you might have a pack of 20, 30 or more turkeys walk under you. And if you don't move, they'll walk completely under you. But during deer season, you can harvest turkeys. And if you've ever tried to draw your bow back or stand up, those turkeys pick you out so quickly. Okay. So this spring, when you're out there turkey hunting, just remember, when you can physically see that bird, don't blink, don't move, don't twitch, don't do anything until it's the right time, because that will ruin the hunt for you. I cannot stress that enough. Movement will ruin a hunt long before making a bad call will ever ruin a hunt. Okay. All right. So kind of getting into the basic sounds of turkey hunting, or the sounds that these turkeys are going to make. Really, there's only a few sounds that you need to learn. Okay. Let me grab a call so I can go ahead and start replicating some of these sounds. There's the yelp, the cluck, and the purr. All right. Really, for the most part, and those are the sounds that the hens are going to make. And those are the three sounds that you really need to focus on. Now, I'm not saying that there's not more sounds. Okay. And the more involved you get into turkey hunting and the longer you're out there in the woods, you're going to hear a lot of other sounds. Like there's tackles, there's fast cutting, but they're all basically variations of the yelp, the cluck, and the purr. And there are a few other sounds like your keys and all that, but you don't need to focus on those during the spring turkey season. Okay. So the yelp, all right. The yelp is basically probably the most common sound that we associate with the hen turkey. And it is simply all right. That's just a single yelp. Then you got two yelps. 3. There is no set number on how many yelps you're supposed to give in a sequence. Okay. It doesn't matter if you do 1, 3, 5, or I've heard hens go on for 15 and more, just constant yelps. All right. And I'll get into here in a little bit on how many you decide to give. All right. So you've got the yelp. Then you got the cluck. All right. All right. Then you got the purr. The purr is a very content sound. A lot of times when you hear the purrs, you're going to hear them when turkeys are walking through the woods, they're feeding, they're doing little whines. And again, they do so many variations of these sounds. It's almost mind blowing, but really the yelp, the cluck, and the purr are the base foundations. Now, that's it. Those are the 3 sounds. Okay. Those are the sounds that you want to learn. But the secret to turkey calling and being an effective turkey hunter is learning how to show excitement and emotion. All right. Turkeys, waterfowl, deer, coyotes, animals, people, whatever. We communicate through vocalizations and body postures. All right. Body postures is a whole nother topic. but we're going to talk about vocalizations. That turkey is going to express her excitement through emotion behind those sounds. All right. So when you say, well, how many yelps do you give? You do high pitched yelps, you do deep yelps. That's the big mystery. All right. And that's what we're trying to figure out as turkey hunters. So for example, these two purrs, I'm going to give you two sets of purrs. They are both purrs, but they mean completely different things. All right. So you've got one purr, which is then you have another set of purrs. And most of the time, when you hear that second set, there's two turkeys doing it. So you've got hang on, right? My diaphragm's starting to go a little bit. All right, that's two turkeys fighting. All right, so right there is an example of how a hen can be relaxed or she can be very excited. Now let's go back to the yelps. You've got so when I do yelps, I'm throwing in clucks also. That's just hunting habits. Cadence is more important than the specific sound itself, having realistic cadences, okay? So I'm very seldom do I ever do just straight yelps without clucks, but a set of yelps that are very content and relaxed is a lot different than same thing with the clucks. Relaxed versus all right. So emotion is everything. Learning how to show that emotion is the key to being successful, because when you're out there, there's going to be days that you want to be really excited, or not even days, even different periods of the hunt. You want to be relaxed, and then sometimes you want to be excited. And that, again, is what we're trying to figure out as turkey hunters, okay? Another example of emotion, all right? And again, waterfowl, turkeys, deer, as they show emotion, and an example I like to use is, again, I've got a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, all right? I remember specifically when they were 2 years old. All right. 2's always a fun age. So I got my son, Knox, which, by the way, my name tag says Knox because he uses this for NTI for school. So, but so Knox, when he was 2 years old, I would take him to, say, Cabela's. And we're in Cabela's and we're looking around. Well, Knox, the 2-year-old, he's wanting to run around. He's wanting to dig into things and check things out. And I'm trying to play cool dad by saying, you know, like, Knox, hey, Knox, buddy, get over here. Stop crawling over there. Hey, Knox, get over here, buddy. And he's wanting to climb on the shelves and he's wanting to dig into things. Well, I'm trying to communicate to Knox without getting too excited or sounding like crazy dad by going, Knox, come here, buddy. Stop. Knox, stop, Knox. Well, eventually I'll lose my cool and then it's, Knox, get over here. Well, Knox then snaps around, looks at me, and he comes running over because everything has changed now, okay? Knox isn't deaf. He's been hearing the words that I've been giving him this whole time. And I didn't give him any different words. I gave him the same words, but I threw emotion behind it, and he responded, all right? We could all tell many examples of this. Animals are the exact same way. Think about, you know, when you train dogs, you you approach that animal with a certain type of dominance, okay? When we communicate with turkeys, we want to do the same thing. There's times that we want to be relaxed. There's times that we want to be excited, all right? And we'll get into that in a little bit in different scenarios of calling. But how to get those sounds out of the calls, all right? If you go to Cabela's or Bass Pro or any of your dealers and you go into the turkey call section, your head might explode with all the calls out there. I mean, there are a bunch of them. So like some of the calls that are out there, you've got box calls. Box calls have been around for decades. I mean, probably even longer than that. I mean, it's probably one of the, original friction calls. And the box call is the trusty go-to. It's very loud. It's sharp. It's somewhat user-friendly. Me personally, I don't use a lot of box calls because it's a large call. I mean, sometimes you get into them and they are absolutely huge. But on windy days, these calls can be very effective. And there's an entire almost genre of turkey hunters that live and die by the box call. That's all they take to the woods, and it's a very effective call. So the box call is an option. There's what we refer to as push pin calls. Okay, these calls they were designed to be probably the most user-friendly call out there. In my opinion, they're the most unrealistic. Basically, the push pin, you can push pull, push pin, push pull. They have different names, but and they sell them also to where you can do fighting purrs. This one needs a lot of chalk, but stay away from push pins. We're going to get into the calls that you can always advance your skill sets on. Okay. So probably the more popular style of turkey calls you've got the mouth diaphragm, which is a call that you actually put in your mouth, and it's probably the most difficult call to learn among all these styles of calls. The diaphragm you put in your mouth and you're pressing your tongue up against hang on, I'm going to change my view a little bit so I can see, make sure I'm showing it. There we go.
I'm on a Zoom call about turkey hunting.
So you actually put the call in your mouth, you're pushing up against the roof of your mouth, and you're expelling air. So there's a lot of air control to operate the diaphragm, but it's a call that you want to learn to use because the most important thing is you can have your gun in hand and still operate the call, to where all the other calls you actually have to use your hands, and sometimes you just want your hands on the gun. So we'll get into a little bit more on the diaphragm. Oh, so the diaphragms, there are more styles and cuts of diaphragms than you can shake a stick at. We personally, we make, I think we're up to, 7 different styles now, different cuts. So in diaphragms, basically it's medical tape with a metal frame, and then this is latex, and then sometimes you'll have prophylactic. But these cuts will create different types of rasp. All right, so you've got, for example, there are common cuts that a lot of call makers will make. So like this is it's called a ghost cut, and a lot of call companies, if you were to check them out and ask for a ghost cut, it's a very common style of cut. And so the ghost cut is going to be a very clean call. It's great for doing keys, softer yelps. And then you've got, which one of my favorites is the batwing. Okay. It's a cut that is very universal because when you run a diaphragm, everyone's mouth shape is different. And the idea is you want to experiment with a bunch of different cuts of diaphragms because everybody likes something different. Because where you place your tongue on that latex is going to determine where you get that clean sound out of that call. So you don't just put the call in the center of your mouth and run it. Sometimes that call is going to set off to the side a little bit, or you're going to manipulate your tongue to pull out different sounds. Getting into explaining how to run a diaphragm that's again a whole nother seminar. And there's actually people out there that are probably, I know, are a lot better at it than I am. You can YouTube search how to run a diaphragm, and you're going to have videos for probably years to watch. And they're all great videos. There's a lot of phenomenal diaphragm callers out there. But just keep in mind that, so the basic fundamentals on diaphragms is typically the more material or the more cuts the diaphragm has, it's going to be raspier. And sometimes you actually have, so like we offer, let me see.
Phil, give me just 1 second.
Absolutely.
All right. Folks, if you're calling in on your phone, welcome. But please make sure that you mute yourself on your end. We can actually hear somebody's conversations a little bit. It's coming in a little strong. So just tap your phone screen and make sure that you're on mute during the presentation. Thank you.
So like these two diaphragms right here, they are exactly the same. They're both called a combo cut. But if you will notice, the part where the material is missing, they're cut on the opposite sides, okay? And this is specifically because some people prefer a left-handed cut or a right-handed cut, depending on the side of their mouth that they like to favor the call, all right? The calls are going to sound exactly the same. It's just, again, when you really get involved in diaphragms, you're going to prefer that cut being on one side or the other. It's like being left-handed and right-handed, okay? And then when you get into, so like the split V is a very user-friendly cut, in my opinion. It's a raspier style cut. When you run this call, you're going to actually, it's going to be more forgiving because it's just going to have a really good turkey sound just right out of the gate. A lot of, I'll call them people that are very proficient running diaphragms. They suggest running just a basic 2-reed diaphragm, just so that way you can actually learn. When you put that call in your mouth, if I put it right in the center and I try to put air over that call, it's going to be very hot. It's going to be very raspy. It almost sounds like a rabbit squall. You could probably call in coyotes with that. But what you want to do is you're going to start maneuvering that call around until you start getting a clean, high-pitched sound. Right there. So I actually have the call kind of offset slightly to the left side of my mouth. And then I'm dropping my tongue to let that call break over. Now I'm kind of over exaggerating that yelp a little bit, but then you're going to slowly start speeding it up. And then to get the clucks, what I'm going to do is just put short bursts of air across this call. But again, probably the most difficult call to teach to use because literally you just got to put it in your mouth and just start experimenting and playing with it. And actually in duck calling and goose calling and learning to call, I call them accidental discoveries. Most of the time it's when you're not paying attention and you're just playing with the call. You stumble across the right sound and you're like, whoa, that's it. That's what I've been trying to get. And hopefully then you can replicate it. So kind of moving on. One of the calls that we sell the most of and is my favorite call is the pot. I'm going to call it the pot friction call. All right. Pot calls come in a lot of different varieties. A lot of companies offer different pot calls. And again, I urge you to try them out, experiment with them. For me, they're the easiest to teach. And they're some of the most versatile as far as getting sounds out of with the least amount of skill needed. All right. So a friction pot call is exactly what it sounds like. It is basically you have a striker, and then this pot call has a particular surface material. This one is a slate, and the tone board is glass. So all of our pot calls now are double-sided. So you've got your primary calling surface, and then you have your secondary. This is the tone board for the call, but it's exposed, so you can actually you can make sounds on that as well. It's pardon me. The Zebroid combo is a great example of that. So you have a primary glass surface, and then it's a slate tone board, but I can run both sides, and I'm going to get different sounds out of both sides. Okay. So we'll run. Let's see. All right. So basically all I'm doing is I'm taking the striker and I'm putting it on the surface. And then when I drag the striker across the surface from the top to the middle, it's going to give me that sound. It's all based off of friction, okay? Now, the thing about running a pot call is, one, this is your sound chamber, okay? If we cover that up and we try to run it, the call's dead, all right? There's no sound. We have to allow that sound chamber to expel that sound. So you could hold it up like this, you could hold it in your hand, but you don't want anything touching those holes on that sound chamber. So this striker right here is a zebra wood, and we refer to it as a one-piece flare tip, all right? So the flare tip right down here, as you can see, it flares out. This is a very user-friendly striker. So basically, if your angle is not 100% correct, the striker is going to be very forgiving, all right? Now, when the biggest mistake I see people make when they go to run a pot call is they really want to press hard. They're really trying to drive that striker into that material, into the top of that surface. That's not the case. Where your sound comes from is, one, it's how tight I'm holding the striker. It's not how hard I'm pushing, but it's how tight I'm actually holding the striker, okay? For example, if I run this call, all right, and I'm holding the striker very loose, I mean, just enough to where it's not falling out of my hand, it's just vibrating, okay? Now, as I squeeze the striker tighter, all right, you're going to notice the sound change. I'm not pushing down any harder to the surface. I'm just squeezing the striker a little bit harder. So listen to this. Real rattly. Tighten up on the striker. It's getting higher pitched. Okay? So to the point to where if I really squeeze it and I'm almost trying to break that striker, it's really high pitched. Okay? So there's a happy medium there. But yeah, you can see there's a dent in my finger from where I'm holding that striker, okay? Now, striker angle is also very important, okay? So if you notice, when I'm running this call, so most of the time when I'm running it this way, now if I turn sideways, that striker is angled away from me slightly, okay? And when I run this call, notice my wrist and my hand, how it's moving. It's not like I'm signing my name. That striker is not changing angle. It's staying at the same angle. I'll try to slow it down so I don't know if that video is blaring. Okay. Now, another thing is I'm not lifting the striker off of the surface, all right? So let me see if I can demonstrate this to you the best. When I condition this call, all right, I've got a perfectly clean surface right there where I just conditioned it. When I put the striker to the surface, I'm never actually going to lift the striker off the surface. What I'm doing is I'm basically doing ovals, all right? So when I drag the striker to me, I'm doing kind of a half moon or the half of the oval, all right? So I drag it to me, I get the yelp, and as I push it away, there's no sound. All right, and that's because of my angle. So then leaving the striker on the surface, I drag it to me. push it away. I'm doing just ovals, okay? And then when you see where see if it focuses. If you see where I ran it, you can see those ovals, okay? So that's the biggest thing about getting those sounds is just, I'm not constantly, you don't hear that ticking sound when I'm running. Once the striker's on the surface, it stays on the surface, okay? So for the yelp, I'm doing those ovals. To do the cluck, I'm bringing the striker closer. See if I can figure this out, how to show you this, sorry. What I'm doing is just short pops. So I'm just popping that striker on that surface. Just a short, fast movement. And then when I want to do cuts, I'm dragging it back, which again, when I drag it back, there's no sound. Pop it to me, pluck. Push it away, no sound. To me, pluck, all right? And then when I get into the fast clucks or cutting, but it's always staying on the surface, okay? Now the purr. So when we assemble these pots, the way this turkey call is designed, again, you have a sound chamber, or a tone board. This is the sound chamber, this is the tone board. That tone board is glued to the wood pot itself, all right? And then the calling surface is glued to the pot up here, all right? So because this glass is more stabilized on the wood, it's going to be higher pitched here. As I move towards the center, away from where it's connected to the wood, you're going to get more of a vibration, if you will, all right? Which is going to be a deeper sound. So when you're calling and you want a high pitch sound, we're going to run this call towards the edge. See if I can show this. See how it's high pitch? And then if I move more towards the center, it's deeper, all right? And then I'll move out towards the edge. It's getting higher pitched again. Turkey calls, all pot calls, they have their sweet spot. Typically, it's about kind of 3/4 or a third of the way, a third of the way up towards the edge, all right? Which gets into the purr. The purr is typically a much softer, deeper sound. So instead of being, instead of being towards the edge of the pot, we want to be more towards the center of the pot. And what we're going to do is we're going to just, there we go. We're going to grip this striker and we're going to drag it to us and let it just skip, if you will. It's going to just vibrate. It's skipping ever so slightly. All right. And you can move that around to the, see, it's higher pitch to where if I was doing fighting purrs, I'd probably want to be more towards the edge. If I want to do a relaxed purr, I'd be more towards the center of the call. All right. Pardon me. So this is our glass call. And if you notice that this part is shiny, this is unconditioned glass. This is what we do is we precondition all of our pots with our laser engraver. And what it does is it basically pulverizes that area of glass. Then we go in and remove it. So that way you have a consistent calling surface all across the pot. Now, conditioning your pot calls. Actually, let me talk about the other variants that are out there. Your most common pot calls are glass and crystal. All right. Visually, it's hard to tell a difference. I really like glass. Crystal is going to be a little bit higher pitch sound, a little bit sharper, maybe louder. But glass and crystal. Slate is probably the most traditional and the oldest style. Again, you got to think about turkey calls 100 years ago. were built out of materials that we had access to. Nowadays, there's a lot of pot calls that are made out of polycarbonate, acrylic, all kinds of man-made materials. This is slate and wood. I mean, this is Earth's gift to us, God's gift to us. Slate is probably the most traditional. A lot of people will call them a slate call. A lot of people will call this a slate call, all right? But they're pot calls, and your surface is typically what you go by. You got glass, you got slate, and then you have anodized aluminum. Sometimes they use unanodized aluminum. But these three calls right here are all going to have different pitch sounds. They all have different applications too. So like aluminum is very loud. It's very, and the speaker probably won't actually, won't be the greatest example of how loud it truly is. But this call is going to be higher pitched. It's very ear piercing, which is great for locating birds. So when you have those days when it's really windy or there's just no turkeys in your immediate area and you're just trying to get a gobble from somewhere, or you want to make sure everything around hears you. So basically, the pot call, the aluminum is going to be very loud. It's great for locating. And again, I love double-sided pots because I can condition this side as well. And then it's going to give me two sounds, basically two calls in one. Okay. And then you've got the slate, which again is the most traditional style of pot call. And it's, in my opinion, it's probably the most realistic. It's got just a really great mellow sound. Very soft. Very user-friendly too, okay? Anodized aluminum, the striker typically wants to slide a little bit more. So there's a lot of different pot styles, and to make it even more confusing, there are lots of different strikers, okay? And this isn't even the tip of the iceberg on strikers. Why there's so many different strikers? These are all different types of wood, okay? So that is Purple Heart. No, I'm sorry, that's African Padauk. It's a very open grain, coarse grain of wood. And what this will do is pretty much dull down any pot call you run it on. In fact, on our anodized aluminum, we only recommend running African Padauk on it. You have Purple Heart. Purple Heart, for any of you woodworkers out there, you know it's a very hard wood, extremely hard wood. It's going to be a higher pitch sound, a little sharper. It's the same thing with Hedge or Osage Orange, depending on what you prefer to call it. It's also a very hard wood. It's going to have a different sound as well. You've got laminate, which is a man-made material. Laminate is, again, it's a higher pitch sound. Higher pitch than what the Hedge is. The Hedge is going to have a little bit more of a fuller sound and a loud sound, to where the laminate is a lot higher pitch. So the reason I like to carry minimal calls and equipment, that's why I don't like to carry a lot of box calls and stuff. I typically will carry with me a few diaphragms, maybe 2 pot calls, but I carry a lot of strikers. Strikers are what you lose in the woods. When you're sitting there, you're calling that turkey in, and then when it goes down and you shoot and you get up and run, most of the time you lose your striker and you leave it in the woods. But between the 2 calls, the 2 pot calls, the diaphragms, and having a variety of strikers, I've got a very wide range of tones in my arsenal to use on that particular gobbler, or, you know, depending on what that gobbler wants. Sometimes they prefer a certain sound over others. All right. And that's what I love about turkey hunting. I love turkey stories because, you know, a lot of guys say, man, I got the box call that will kill every gobbler out there. They always answer it. And the most vivid experience I've had with that, I was hunting with my brother-in-law in Iowa, and we're on this public ground. And in fact, it was a zebra wood combo like this, but he had this striker that had no name on it. We don't know who made it. But it was a soft wood, but it was a very high pitched striker. All right. And I'm not kidding you. That turkey would only answer that particular striker on this pot. And believe me, I tried everything I could to get him to answer one of my strikers in this pot, and he wouldn't do it. He would answer that striker every time. There was something about that pitch or that particular bird on that particular day only wanted that sound. And then 2 days later, I found out my brother-in-law lost that striker in the woods. So that striker's gone to never be found again. But again, that's what I love about calling turkeys, is because you're going to have the calls that you have confidence in. And what it really boils down to, it's not always the pitch of the call that's the most important. It's the cadence of how you call. You want us to have realistic cadences. And the only way to get that is to listen to wild hen turkeys call, okay? The internet is full of videos of just natural hens calling. Learn those cadences. That's where you're going to sound realistic. It's not necessarily the pitch that you call, but it's the cadences. And then it's the emotion that you deliver to that bird on that given day, all right? Again, this is important. Same brother-in-law, same state of Iowa. I was hunting with my wife and my brother-in-law, and we hunted this property, and it was the middle of the day, and I'm not kidding you. The first call we made, this gobbler sounds off. He was across this field, and he was on another side of this fence. We could see him with the binoculars, and this gobbler is running back and forth. He will not cross that fence, but he is answering at everything we're giving him, all right? We sat there for 4 hours thinking that gobbler's going to jump that fence and come to us. He never did. For a good 3 hours, he always answered us. Well, then he went up into the woods, and he just lost interest and left, okay? 4 hours we sat there. The very next day, we hunted some other properties, didn't have any luck. We go to that same property, same spot. We sit down and we call, that bird gobbles. And the three of us are like, we're not going to do this again. We're not going to sit here this long. So we're sitting there trying to think what we're going to do. Like, man, this gobbler's answering again. My wife looks over, and she just nonchalantly said, he's coming. We're like, what do you mean he's coming? The next thing you know, we look up, that gobbler is sprinting across that field coming right for us. We weren't ready for him. We didn't kill him, actually. He ran up on us before we could get ready. He got behind us. My brother-in-law shot, missed. But the point of the story is you got the same, I'm 99% sure it's the same bird, same setup, 2 different days, 2 completely different outcomes, okay? Every day's different. When you go out there in the woods, you might go to a public piece of property or a private piece, and you may not hear a gobbler, or they don't want to answer, all right? You could go back the next day, and the place could be exploding with turkeys, all right? So just keep that in mind. And another thing, turkey hunting, when you research turkey hunting and you're looking on the internet, all you're going to see is success, all right? You're going to see people calling up birds. You're going to see birds running to, I saw a video where a guy shot one at 1 step, all right? That's not reality. That is the best of every situation. Turkey hunting is not a high success rate pursuit, okay? When I first got into turkey hunting, again, I didn't really know much about it, but I went for 4 years before I ever killed my first bird, okay? During turkey season, I will hunt almost every day. And I'm very fortunate if I get 1 bird, let alone 2 in the state of Kentucky, okay? And so do not base your success on actually shooting birds, okay? Always base your success on if you learned anything, if you got that adrenaline rush where you feel like your heart's going to jump out of your chest, because I promise you, you will if you stick with it long enough, okay? That's kind of a quick run through on calling. I've got some short video clips I can show of really good examples of what we've been talking about. I want to save that for later. That way, if anybody, because I know we're 7:33 right now, in case anybody wanted to jump off, or we can get some answers going, and then we can look at the videos. Becky, it's whatever you whatever you prefer.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let's hop over to some of our questions that we had dropped in the chat. And so the first one was, what are you using to scuff the surface of your call? What was that little device you had?
Yes, great question. I cannot believe I forgot to mention this. So on friction calls, they operate off of friction, okay? So what you don't want, so for example, this particular call, you see the real clean part. If I try to run it, there's very little to no sound there. It's just skipping, okay? But when I run it on the conditioned part, it's creating that friction to make that sound. What this is, so a lot of companies sell little tools like these. This is our conditioning kit that we use or we offer. And if you notice, and it's not rocket science. You've got Scotch Brite pads and basically drywall cloth. Now, this is basically Arkansas whetstone. Okay, it's almost like a knife sharpening stone. But what we do is we use the stone on glass. All right. Now, the secret to pot calls, in my opinion, is when you condition that call, you want to make sure the way we assemble our calls, okay? Every call companies are all different, but our mentality on this is if you notice the grain of that wood, it's going a certain direction, okay? When we condition these calls, we always want to condition with the grain of the wood, okay? So from day one, when you get this call, and you can, or any call, you want to condition with the grain of the wood, okay? Always. Don't sit there and go in circles in different directions, because then what's happening is you're creating inconsistencies in that glass or that material. And then when you go to run the call, when you're running that striker, you want to run it against what you just conditioned and against the grain of the wood. All right. Our mentality is that you're going to get cleaner breaks running against the grain of that wood. All right. But yeah, so when you do get friction calls, you are going to want to get tools to maintain them. So for the red Emery or the red Scotch Brite, we use that on our slate. That's how you condition the slate. So friction calls, your friction call's worst nightmare is oil, fingerprints. You want to keep your fingers off the surface, because when you put your fingerprints on there, it's going to you're going to get inconsistencies and the call's not going to want to run. Anodized aluminum. We use gray on our anodized aluminum. You can also use red, but the idea on anodized is you go very light. We're not pushing hard at all. In fact, you can also, pardon me, too much talking. You can also recondition your anodized aluminum with a alcohol pad, because all you're trying to do is you're just removing any type of oil or impurities that got on that call. So we use the gray on the anodized aluminum, and then the drywall screen, that's for our strikers. So when you're running a striker, if you keep that striker in your vest and it's always rubbing on material and it kind of smooths it out, you just take the end of that striker tip and you just rub it on that cloth. Now, again, we're not pushing real hard. We're not trying to reshape that striker. We're just wanting to rough it up a little bit, so then that way you're maximizing the friction between your striker and your surface. Okay. Great question. I apologize for missing that. I'm glad you asked that.
All right. The next question was, how often do you use fighting purrs?
Great question. So fighting purrs is kind of a last resort. That's kind of after you've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at them. Okay. And actually I've got a video on here that I can show you. And it's also, so all of these videos you can see if you go to Homegrown Experience. These videos are from Homegrown Experience's YouTube channel and our website. And also on Field Proven Calls YouTube channel. In fact, we've got even more videos. And a lot of our videos, they're not just action-packed, call them in and kill them. We try to explain a lot of different parts of the hunt. So there's a lot of voiceover. We break down the hunt while we're doing certain things, while we're doing certain calls. But the fighting purr is my method of calling. That's right. We're going to get into some calling scenarios. My method of calling is I want to give as little as possible. And this doesn't matter if it's on ducks, geese, turkeys, whatever, as little possible to get the job done. All right. Because in my opinion, once you give 100% of excitement and emotion, no matter what that may be, once you give 100%, giving 50% really doesn't, it's not as effective anymore. So I always like to kind of keep that excitement in my back pocket for when I need it. All right. If that bird will come in with just yelps, awesome. That's what we want. If he's not responding to the yelps, or let's say he's hung up with hens, or if he's hung up. So when turkeys, it's crazy how a turkey can come to you. Sometimes they will cross hills and canyons to get to you. Sometimes the smallest stick will cause them to hang up. A hang up is when a bird basically stops coming your way and he's just sitting there gobbling and he wants you to come to him, which is typically what happens in nature. The fighting purr is when that bird is not coming to us, okay? Or if there's a group of gobblers, which this video I'll show you all, if you've got a group of gobblers with hens, sometimes the urge to fight or the urge of dominance takes over and that bird can't resist to pass up a fight. So fighting purrs is typically last resort, and it's saved a lot of hunts. We've had hunts to where literally I was ready to get up and walk away, and we're like, all right, let's do this fighting purr thing, and we just did fighting purrs until our hands hurt, thinking, what else do we got? It's our last resort. And sometimes it pans out. So last resort is fighting purrs.
Awesome.
So, couple hunting scenarios. Typically when the birds are up on the roost, first thing in the morning, I like to hold off on calling. That bird is up there basically just scanning the area for hens. He's gobbling. And we know where that bird's at. And typically it's before daylight or right at light. And that's a perfect time for us to maneuver on that bird without giving away our position. So remember, as soon as you call, that bird knows where you're at. And they are very good at it. That bird can hear you sound off, and he probably knows the tree you're sitting at least the immediate area. So if you're going to maneuver and try to get closer or get a better position strategically on that bird, do it while he's gobbling on his own and save your hen yelps for later, okay? Also, when you yelp and that bird's on the roost, you're giving him time to figure you out. And if there's other hens in the area. So gobblers have a pecking order, and so do hens, all right? Gobblers don't like to share. They like to fight with other gobblers. Hens are the same way. So if you're on the ground and you start yelping away and you have a dominant hen up there that wants that gobbler, she's hot, she will pitch down and lead that gobbler away, all right? I personally do not have high success rate right at fly down, all right? Typically, my success rate, and really, in my opinion, the most fun time to hunt is middle of the day. When that bird's roosting, there's a lot of times that gobbler already has hens around him. So he visually sees hens. So for him to leave hens that he visually sees to go after a hen he does not see is not very likely, all right? So typically, when they fly down, they're going to go with the hens that they visually see, and they're henned up. So the term henned up is when they're with hens for possibly even a few hours, all right? In my opinion, the magical time of turkey hunting is between 10 and 2, all right? That's the time when that gobbler goes off with those hens, and he either breeds them, or if those hens are not ready to breed, but he spent enough time with those hens to where then, after a few hours of being rejected, you call, that's your window of opportunity for him to say, you know what, I want to go track down this girl that's kind of talking hot and heavy, all right? So wait till the bird, a lot of times wait till the bird flies down. Ideas that I have on calling turkeys. Sometimes I'm calling to get a response from the gobbler. That's when I'm looking for a bird. So middle of the day, if I'm walking, a ridge of public ground and I'm just trying to locate a bird, I'm calling to get a response to find out that bird's location. All right. And that's a good feeling, is when you call and he answers immediately. That means that bird is pretty hot. When you call and then there's a delay, then he answers, that's information that we want to know. That gobbler may not be that hot. All right. If we can get that gobbler and he's hot, or let's say a gobbler, once we call and he answers, as soon as that's consistent, then I like to change my method of calling. I switched to a method of I'm no longer wanting that gobbler to answer me. If he answers, great, but I'm not worried about that. What I'm doing is I'm sitting there waiting for him to gobble on his own. And I'm sitting there with call in hand, and as soon as he gobbles, I like to hit him with excited calling. Really fast, excited calling, all right? Think of it as we're paying him a compliment. I like to call it an ego booster, all right? I mean, this beautiful gobbler, he is designed, God built him to show off. He's strutting, he's gobbling, he's a proud specimen. Let's give him a compliment. So when he gobbles and we fire back with this really excited hen saying, whoa, I like you, when he gobbles, hit him with that excited hen. And then if he fires back again, that's great. But what I'll do is I'll do that a couple times and then I change again. I stop. All right. So we're paying him compliments. He gobbles, we answer. He gobbles, we answer. If he's not coming any closer to us, hopefully he is making his way towards us. And that's another thing you want to learn to do is read gobblers in the woods. We're kind of getting off subject, but when a gobbler is pointed away from you, gobbling, he can sound. So the difference between a gobbler pointed away from you and a gobbler pointed towards you can literally sound like two different birds. Or it can sound like that bird is completely leaving you, all right? And it's literally the difference between him pointed away from you and pointed towards you. I've got a video I'm going to show you a great example of that. Being able to recognize that rattle and that gobble and know that that bird is pointed in your direction is important, because he's either making his way towards us. I mean, he's not going to walk towards you backwards. If he's gobbling and you can tell that he's pointing in your direction, that's a good sign. It means he's interested and he's gaining ground. But going from that ego booster of call when he gobbles, if he's not closing the distance at a rate that we're content with, then what I'll do is get extremely excited, answering, following up with him, and then literally just shut down. Stop calling and put your calls in your vest and sit on your hands so you do not call. And it's so important. So we're giving him the silent treatment. We just went from a hen that's very excited, that's paying him tons of compliments, to now we're not talking anymore. So in my mind, I'm thinking this gobbler is like, wait a minute, this girl was really liking me. What's going on? Did another gobbler move in? So his ego is now starting to get the best of him, and he wants to come find out why this turkey's not talking anymore. Okay. That's a method that is probably the hardest to do, because to stop calling is the hardest thing to do in the turkey woods. And another tip is take your phone or your watch, and when you sit down, this is a technique I learned coyote hunting. When you sit down and you start calling, set your stopwatch on your phone to keep track of time, because I promise you, if you say, you know what, I'm going to give him the silent treatment for a good 5 to 10 minutes, in 2 minutes, you're going to say, oh, it's been forever. I need to start calling again. It's the only way that I can actually keep track of realistic time. And it's so important, because if you really want to give this bird the silent treatment, use your phone to keep track of time. So that way you truly are giving that bird a good amount of time. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Field. We had another question. We have quite a few in the chat here. So one of the participants is interested in making pot calls themselves, and they asked, they want to use the aluminum playing surface. So should they use a blasted or anodized aluminum?
Yep.
Oh, and there's like two more sub questions here. What material for the tone board, and wood or plastic pots?
Really, you can play around with different materials because they're all going to give you different tones. All right. And I'm not going to say what's right or wrong. When we started designing our pots, we had probably 30, 40 different combinations. All right. And we started out as a waterfowl call manufacturer before we ever started manufacturing turkey calls. And what we would do is we took samples. So pre-COVID, we used to do a lot of direct consumer shows like the NWTF show, NRA Great American Outdoor Show. And we had a wide variety of samples of calls, and we encourage people to try them and see what they like the best. And we kind of just, went with what the average, what people truly liked or what we thought was the most realistic. So to answer your question, there really is no wrong. There is no right or wrong combination. You're depending on the surface that you use. So if you're going with anodized aluminum, I personally like anodized aluminum a lot better. One is because remember what we talked about earlier about movement. That surface is a lot darker being anodized. Having pure shiny aluminum in the woods, just moving around, it's like a mirror out there, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. I like anodized, and I do like Padauk because again, it grabs that material. So the one thing with anodized is it's a very slick surface. So you want a striker that is going to grab that material. So we use cherry. We use glass tone boards, cherry pots with anodized aluminum. I'm sure there's other combinations you can go with. They're going to sound great. So just experiment with different materials and see what you like.
Yeah, that sounds like a really fun project.
Absolutely.
Okay. So for a beginner, a complete beginner buying their first call, what should they look for and what style do you recommend?
I recommend personally going with a pot call. As far as brands, there's a bunch of brands out there. I mean, I am personally, as a beginner call, slate is hard. It's hard to go wrong. It's a very user-friendly surface. Some companies do make double-sided pot calls. By doing that, you're going to get two surfaces in one call. So you're going to get two calls in one. As a beginner, get a pot call and get a diaphragm. Play around with both, okay? Because again, that diaphragm is going to be very useful when that bird is approaching and you got your gun in your hand, okay? But the first call I would learn to use is you're going to use it on 99.9% of your hunt. I do recommend going with a pot call. It's just because you can visually, diaphragms are tough because it's hard to teach because you can't really see inside of someone's mouth and what they're doing. Box calls are great, but at the same time, they're limited on the sounds they can get. Now, I know that someone's going to chime in and say, well, that's, not the case. You can get every sound you want out of it. Yes, you can. But in my opinion, it takes more skill to get purrs and clucks and a wide variety of sounds out of this box call than what it does out of a pot call. All right. Pot calls are great because, again, they're very versatile. You can visually see what you're doing. And it's just, in my opinion, they're easier to learn. So I would go slate and I would go pot call.
Awesome. Yeah, good recommendation. That's what I started with too. All right. So you kind of already touched on this, all the different tools that you take with you as far as you take multiple strikers. But is one sufficient?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, I've gone turkey hunting with just one call. Turkey hunters are notorious for packing a lot of gear. You wouldn't think so, but we are. And I'm kind of a minimalist. I like to use as little calls as possible. And towards the end of the season, it seems like in the beginning of the season, I've got a lot more stuff. By the end of the season, I've walked so much, I've literally reduced it down to just a couple calls. You can absolutely go with just one call, one striker. As far as choosing that striker and that call, good luck. There's a lot of options out there. My favorite go-to sound is probably the most versatile. If I was going to go one call, one striker, I would do the glass over slate, double-sided, again, because I have two calling surfaces and one call with a zebra wood striker. To me, this is kind of middle of the road. It's not too high pitch. It's not too deep. I can get loud. I can get soft. It sounds great on the slate. Sounds great on the glass. I would go with a zebra wood or possibly a laminate. You can't go wrong with really any of them. But no, absolutely. Yeah, don't dive in and buy, a lot of different calls when you're just getting started. You're eventually going to want to try different calls just to see what you like. I feel like diaphragms is where you really buy a lot of them, because I know some guys will hang on to them from year to year. I never have, because by the end of the season, they've been in my mouth so long, they've been in my truck. Even when I was a kid, I lose diaphragms like crazy, and I just always got more every year. But diaphragms, you'll definitely probably go through quite a few of them, because there are so many cuts and options, and you're gonna find a style that you like. And then once you find it, then you just stick with that style.
Nice. And this is a question that just came to me while you were holding the double-sided call. Do you condition the slate on the back just the same as you would if it was on the top?
Absolutely. So I don't use the stone, but I use the Scotch-Brite for the slate. So yes. Yep, you just condition it with the Scotch-Brite, and after you condition it, you're off to the races.
Awesome. Thanks, Field. Okay. So do you have any tips for calling in the rain?
So calling in the rain, I typically stick with diaphragms. Now, there are waterproof strikers out there. We don't offer any, because I have not truly found a waterproof striker that I'm absolutely in love with. Your surface is waterproof, okay? That glass can get wet. And our most water resistant striker is going to be laminate. But I know there's carbon strikers, there's acrylic strikers. There are waterproof strikers out there. And again, this is just my opinion. I'm sure there's a lot of great strikers out there. And companies do offer waterproof strikers. We personally do not. So rain is the killer on friction calls, because it hurts your friction. So, and really, that's what I do love about glass, is because, right here, I'll show you this. So like, let's say it gets a droplet of water or something on there, and it gets wet. All right. And then what I can do is, one, if you notice, because of where I sanded it, it's actually going to start drying itself very quickly. But then I can take, basically, if I wipe it off, and then if I just hit it with that sanding stone real quick, and then, it takes a lot of water to make your calls where they don't operate. And your striker is going to be the first thing to go. That's, again, why I keep a variety of strikers. So if it's in a, downpour rain, there better be a hot gobbler. Otherwise, I'm heading back to the truck. But I cycle through strikers because I allow them to dry as I'm running. But again, that's where the diaphragm is very useful. But no, try out waterproof strikers. Companies make them, and I'm sure they're great strikers.
All right. Speaking of the diaphragm calls, how do you know which side to put towards the roof of your mouth? And do you have any tips on purring with the diaphragm?
Okay, so the diaphragm call, the horseshoe or the U is always going to go out. So it's always going to go like this. And depending on the cut that you have, you always want your tongue touching all of the latex. So basically what I mean by that is This call right here has 3 layers of latex, and they're staggered. If I was to lay it in upside down, the top reed would not actually be touching my tongue because it's the shortest one. A lot of call makers, the turkey call, they have a dimple right there on that side that is a little, they both have dimples, but that one is more prominent. If you can see it, it goes down. Okay. But when you put it in your mouth, and the one thing that I was never really instructed in the beginning is a lot of people were explaining, like, put it in your mouth like it's a piece of candy. And I always kept it in the center. And I could never figure out how to get the clear sound. So which it still sounds decent, but you're going to shift that call one way or another. And again, everybody's mouth is different. And this is where you really kind of stumble across that sound. So just by playing with it, you want that high-pitched sound. You want to have complete control of that. And then by dropping your tongue and your jaw in your mouth, that's when you're going to get that break. The purr is, there's a couple different ways you can purr. The most realistic or the best sounding purr is kind of like gargling without water. So if you were to just gargle water, practice doing it without water. My mouth is very relaxed and I'm just gargling so that air flutters. But then you want to start toning it down to get those softer purrs. The purr is probably one of the hardest notes to teach because some people just don't have the ability to gargle with a dry throat. But and some diaphragms purr better than others. If you have like a higher pitch, tighter stretched diaphragm, for me, it's not as user friendly to purr on. See how high pitched it is? There we go. But it's harder to get it softer. So that's another thing. Some calls. So if you watch a turkey calling contest, those guys are changing calls in between the sounds they're giving. That's because some calls are better at giving certain sounds than others. So gargle without water. That's the secret to the purr. So I did say there was another way. You can flutter your lips. You can do a I'm not that good at it because I don't really practice that much, but in the woods, it sounds decent. Which you're going to get the most realistic purr in the back of your throat.
That was awesome. I've never learned how to do that myself. So very cool. Okay, so there was a question about locator calls.
Yes.
And when do you use those?
Okay. Again, we all know what opinions are like, and everybody's got them. In my opinion, in the morning, I do use owl calls. All right. If the gobblers are not gobbling on their own. Again, if they're gobbling, I'm not doing anything. Just let them gobble. They do sell owl calls. So this is an owl call. And this kind of gets back into realism versus effectiveness. And realism is not always the most effective. Okay. So an owl call, this is a reed owl call. There's also, they make an owl call that is just strictly air. It's like an air chamber. It's like, I think they call it a hoot tube or but it's just air. There's no reeds. This call actually has reeds in it. And an owl call in the morning. That's great and it sounds awesome, but I don't use it. I haven't used an owl call in years, but I do use owl sounds. I learned a lesson years ago. Again, this goes back to hanging out with people that are a lot smarter than I am and have more hunting experience than I do. I was in Tennessee with the owner of Avery Outdoors, and I was down there turkey hunting with him. And I was pulling everything out of my vest, and I had a little reed owl or a little owl call. It was I forget what it was. It's like a black sound chamber, and you just it's kind of like if you do it with your hand, you know, it wasn't loud, all right, but it sounded good. And Tom Matthews, the owner of Avery, probably one of the best turkey hunting lessons I've ever learned. He said, "Man, that sounds good. Let me hear that again." And I hit it, and he's like, "Whoa, that sounds awesome." He goes, "Jump in the truck. We're going to go locate some birds. I need your sound. You sound really good." I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go." So we take off down the road. We trek across this field, and he says, "Right up there on that ridge," he said, "there's a gobbler up there. I just want to make sure he's there." I'm like, "All right." I start hitting this owl tube. I hit it. You know, I'm like, bird's not answering. And he's like, "Man, I know that bird's up there. And you sound awesome. Hit that again." I'm like, "Okay." Bird's not gobbling. And he said, "Man, you sound awesome. And that bird's not gobbling. He must not be there." He said, "One more time." So you know how the story goes. I hit it again. No answer. He goes, "No, you sound great. And that bird is not gobbling. He's not there. Let's get out of here." We turn around, go to walk off. He turns around and goes, "Woo! Woo, 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 woo." Bird gobbles. He says, "Throw that dang call away and learn to do it with your voice." And I was literally just like, "Yes, sir." That moment, I gave that bird everything I could on that call. The call sounded great, but it didn't have the emotion and the enthusiasm that his voice did. So when I turkey hunt, I use my voice. It doesn't sound as realistic, but that turkey is not saying, he's not sitting up there in that tree saying, "Wait a minute, that owl cadence doesn't sound as good as this owl cadence. I don't think it's an owl." They don't process information like that. This sounds great, but it's not as effective as "woo, woo, 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 woo." That's louder, more enthusiasm. Turkeys answer it better. So that's my locator. As far as midday locators, I don't really use crow calls. There's a lot of different locators out there. Coyote calls are popular. Typically, and again, this is my opinion, I use turkey calls as locators. When I'm trying to locate a bird, I don't call a lot, but when I do call, I call very aggressive and to where that bird will hopefully sound off. But that's how I locate.
Nice. Thank you for those
Sorry,
demonstrations.
the story might have been a little longer winded than it should have been.
That was an extra treat. Okay, so the next question. So one more time for the people in the back, what brand of calls are you using?
Field proven calls. That is the calls that I'm kind of biased because I make them. So, but one thing with our calls, I mean, we've been in business for 11 years, and we stand behind our products, and we don't release calls until we feel like that we're filling a void that we need to in our line. We do the same thing with our waterfowl calls. We put them to the test long before they ever see the public.
Nice. Awesome. Okay, and we've talked about this a little bit, but just to cover it one more time, can you call too much?
Absolutely. You can call too much. It's one of those things where you're trying to read that bird. If that bird is being very vocal and he's just firing off answering to you, you can get away with a lot more. Sometimes those turkeys will not gobble at all. And I've got another video to represent that. And that goes back to the hunting styles. Run and gun is hands down my favorite way to turkey hunt, to where you're mobile, you're calling until you find a vocal gobbler, then you set up, and then you play that game of chess with that particular gobbler. A lot of times later in the season, especially in our area or late season Indiana, we've got a hunt where we had, I think, 3 longbeards and like 5 or 6 hens, and they never made a sound all morning. All the way from fly down, and we ended up killing one of those birds, but it was because we were set up with a ground blind and decoy, but they did not gobble at all. So that just comes with trial and error. There is no secret formula on how much to call, how little to call. That's where your experience and then your hunting stories come from. On you play the Monday morning quarterback and you said, man, I shouldn't have called as much as I did, or we should have called more. I don't have that answer. That's the magic of turkey hunting.
It certainly is. Okay, so I like this question. If you're hunting out of a ground blind, are you aiming the sound out the window, or are you just calling from the middle of the blind?
Great question. So I like to always aim the sound. All right. Now, there are some ground blinds now. So in the past, the older style ground blinds were solid material. And this comes from my duck hunting and waterfowl hunting background. When we're in duck blinds, pits, waterfowl pits, I do not like blowing that duck call or that goose call inside that blind, because it sounds like you're calling in a chamber. It affects the realism of the sound. So for me, turkey hunting, I just have that same mentality that a lot of times I'll stick that call out the window and aim it towards that bird. There are some ground blinds now that I think we use one in one of these videos. I think Primos makes it. I don't know if it's called the 360, but it's mesh all the way around. I feel like that blind, you don't get that sound chambery sound, and I'm not really as worried about as much in that blind like I am a blind that's just solid material and you just got one little open window. I do like to stick that call out that blind and aim it. And a lot of times, if I know this bird's over here, I might call at him, or I might actually call away if I'm trying to create that illusion that that bird is moving away and we're trying to get that bird to come to us. Okay. Just remember that the direction of his gobble sounds completely different, and the direction of your call sounds completely different. So in turkey calling, you're creating a story. You're creating an illusion of that hen. Is she getting closer to him? Is she, moving away? A lot of times I love hunting with, I've got a few buddies that I hunt with, and sometimes we'll set up a caller and then we'll set up the shooter, and then the caller will back up 25 yards, 50 yards, or maybe continue acting like he's moving away, trying to get that bird to cut the distance a little bit. So yeah, the direction of the call does make a difference. And yes, in ground blinds, I do like to point it out of the blind, but don't do it when that bird's visible, because again, it goes back to that movement thing. That movement is what that bird will pick up on.
Very cool. All right. So we have a participant that hunts Rios in Oklahoma, and they're wondering, with your experience, do you change your aggressiveness or add or subtract different notes based on the subspecies of bird?
So I've videoed a Rio hunt. I don't have a lot of experience with Rios. From my experience, they were very vocal. And when we were hunting them, we did call more than what I probably would with Easterns. All right. My experience is with Osceolas and Easterns primarily. I have noticed that Rios, again, are a lot more vocal, and it's the terrain you're hunting them in. Okay. In Kentucky, Kentucky and Indiana, we hunt a lot of ridges, to where when you're on the top of a ridge, and we had a hunt last year, that bird is, no joke, 20 yards away and you can't see him, because he might be on a bench over a ridge. So our calling technique changes based on, because when that bird shows himself, he's literally 15 yards. And when they show themselves for a few seconds, and then they're back over that bench, out of your life. They're gone forever. Hunting wide open terrain, I do not have a lot of experience in. So I can't give you a straight up answer on specific calling techniques in that situation. But I do know that from my experience in Florida, where we're hunting big flat areas, and a lot of times the woods are so thick you can't walk through them. So you're navigating big cattle pastures. We will call a little bit more. So I'm sorry I don't have a definite answer on your Rio question, but bigger open spaces typically call more, but don't take that to the bank, because honestly, I'll just tell you, I'm not experienced with Rios.
Okay, and then
Typically,
Noah
so my final answer is, in my opinion, terrain determines how we call versus species, if that makes.
Yes, I was following you there. I think that's definitely where my mind went, was the terrain differences for those subspecies. So Noah had an experience where he sat in the same spot for 2.5 hours and ended up having a gobbler return after he left the other hen.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wondering if you had a similar experience or if he just got lucky, and how long you typically will wait on a gobbler.
All right. I know my weaknesses, and my weaknesses are patience. I am not a patient person, and the most successful turkey hunters out there are the people that are patient. If you've got a gobbler and he's answering you and then he shuts down and goes off with hens, if he was answering you, chances are at some point in the day he's going to make his way back. I've messed up more gobblers by not being patient than anything else. When they're hot to trot and they're gobbling and then they shut down, my attention span leaves the building very quickly. And I've had it to where I've sat there for a good half hour, and then I'm like, all right, this isn't happening. Get up, and that bird was coming, and he starts putting and takes off. No, that was not a freak accident. That is being a good turkey hunter. Wait it out. Be patient, and you will kill more turkeys. That's another, I love running and gunning, but I do find myself when I am in a ground blind, I'm a lot more patient. And I feel like that's another advantage ground blinds offer, is because typically you're in a comfortable chair, you're hidden, and ground blinds encourage you to hang out more because of the comfort level. And that's, so by you being there longer and waiting, the result is success. So no, stick with that. That's a great, you're far in advance on just understanding to wait them out.
Okay, so that was the last question in the chat, and I know you've got these videos to show folks, which might drum up some more questions. So if you want to pull those.
Are we good on time? Or are we, I just want to make sure.
Well, we still have 46 folks with us.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm here to, this is gonna be fun. I want to get some of these up. Let's see here. All right. So what this is, let me figure out how to. All right. Why is it not showing? All right. Hang on 1 second. Let me. It would be right if we don't have some clips. Oh man. All right, go to the show. Oh, here we go. All right, so Becky, help me out. Make sure. Can you see the screen right now?
Yep, I can see the full video.
Okay. This is a really quick hunt. This is an example of what we were talking about with turkeys. If they could smell, you wouldn't be able to kill them. And this kind of debunks that theory because you've got two gobblers right here, and I'm in a ground blind with my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old and my wife. Okay, and these turkeys are probably maybe 20 yards. So as soon as I hit play, you're going to hear me telling my 4-year-old to quit coughing, everybody get down. There's gun barrels sticking outside the blind. These birds obviously see us, but they're not, again, they're not really that concerned. So here's this hunt.
Guys, get out, get out.
Yeah! I got two! Get me out! I want to get out! No, no, I want to see! I want to see! I want to see! Go, 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 go!
All right, so that's just that's a quick example. So we shot a double, and after she shot, she handed me a gun. She didn't eject the shell. There was a lot going on there, and that bird was so just confused that his buddy's down. He's not really running off. So again, turkeys are very good at being afraid of everything, but we know how to use their weaknesses against them. And again, we don't give them too much credit on being the sharpest critters in the forest. So let me pull up another hunt. So this hunt right here is all right. So this, I'm sorry, I'm new to this, so bear with me. All right, so this is an example of a hen. So this goes back to, this is an example of hens have very good hearing. Turkeys do in general. But you got to remember when they're in the woods, they're hearing all different types of sounds. And it's movement that'll spook a bird versus sound. All right, so if you're just slightly off on your tones, don't worry about it, okay? Because these turkeys are not going to hear an off tone and say, whoa, we need to get out of here. This turkey that we're getting ready to show is 5 yards away, and we do what we call the talking test. I start talking basically at normal level with this hen 5 yards away. We're not in the ground blind, and she does not spook. So this is an example of vocalizations and sounds will not spook a bird nearly as quick as what movement will.
We are 1 day away from opening day of the spring Kentucky turkey season, and it is a cold, rainy, nasty, wet day. All I can say is I hope tomorrow we have better weather conditions. But I got a quick question for you. What is the closest you've ever had a turkey to you? And what happened during that experience? Did the bird spook or did the bird not spook? The reason for asking is I found this video clip from 2011, 2012 sometime, and it's pretty cool. We have this hen turkey come in within 5 yards of us, and we decided to kind of do a little test and start talking a little bit louder and a little bit louder to see if the noise bothered the bird. We have a phenomenal hide, and we want to see if noise would bother the bird. I'm a firm believer that visually you can spook a bird a lot quicker than you can with noise. I'm not saying every bird is the same. I'm just saying from my experience, if you have a really good hide, it can take a lot to spook a bird with just noise. But I want to see your all's thoughts and experiences, but check this video clip out. It's pretty cool. And regardless, I hope you have a great spring and good luck tomorrow. We'll see you.
Talking test. I'm not sure how far she is. But as I keep talking louder, it doesn't really seem like she cares. I'm just talking normal right now. And this hen's about 5 yards maybe. It's obvious that movement is what they don't like. Hey, hen. Where's the gobblers at? Go get a gobbler and bring them back to us. Are you going to bring that gobbler back to us? And she walks away. But she still isn't spooked. Nothing close as you ever did roll, thank you. No, they've been closer, but they've busted me before.
Okay, so that's just an example of, you know, a turkey that, again, vocalizations, we've noticed that with deer also. It's not necessarily the sounds as much as the movements that are they're going to get you busted. One video I want to show you is the difference between a gobbler that is pointed towards you and pointed away from you. Again, understanding what they sound like is hearing the difference in their gobbles is going to give you a lot of information on if that bird's point, because you got to figure a lot of your situations in your turkey hunts, majority of your hunt, you never see the bird until they actually show up. I mean, the majority of your hunt is you listening to this bird and trying to figure out what he's doing, where he's going. And you're just trying to read off of vocalization. So here's an example. I'm going to scrub through this. This is a turkey hunt that's on our Homegrown Experience YouTube channel. And so right here. So I'm going to let this play through, but once he's going to notice that he can see a gobbler up on the roost. And listen, as soon as I hit play, listen to these turkeys on how they sound when they're gobbling. And then you're going to notice there's one bird that we point out, but then there's a second bird underneath him. When you first see the two birds on the roost, they're pointed away from us. They're both going to turn towards us. And then when they gobble, listen to how their gobbles sound differently when they're pointed towards us versus when they're gobbling away from us as soon as I hit play.
I swear I can see one through the trees. Yeah. He's trying to run away. That's cool. There's two of them there. There's one right under you. Yep, that's one that walked there too. Wow. The one under you is that real deep rattle. This is my last hunt of the year. This is a good one.
we're exposed, but really they can only see the tops of our heads. I'm glad we didn't sneak down to that field.
So that's an example of, you know, just the way they sound when they're pointed towards you versus away. So what we do is we end up making a move on these birds because they pitched down and then they weren't coming towards us. So we tried to maneuver to a better position. And then we basically end up getting to where we got 4 longbeards together and they're with hens. Not a good situation. So we end up watching them for a while. We call to them quite a bit. And we do a series of fighting purrs. And basically what ends up happening is the hens, our fighting purrs attracted the hens. The hens came our direction. The 4 longbeards eventually came towards us, and we were able to harvest one of the birds. So a lot of times you're calling hens. So by calling those hens up to us, the gobblers followed. So that's a hunt that y'all can pull up and watch. It's a little bit of a lengthier hunt. Let me pull up another video. Here's what I love. This is an older video that we shot a number of years ago, but this is why I love run and gun turkey hunting. This is a gobbler that I shot at literally 7 steps. And these are the type of hunts that that I want to happen when I'm turkey hunting. Just the excitement of, and again, I never saw this gobbler until he was probably 15 yards away, and then I ended up shooting him at 7 steps away. But I'll fast forward. So basically, we set up, we heard him gobbling. He was circling around through the woods behind us. We go to relocate, and he's coming. So we instantly just sit down as quick as we can. So if you notice that now that I've got the gun in my hand, I'm no longer using the pot call. I would rather use the pot call. It sounds more realistic, but when you have a bird that's approaching you can't see, the last thing you want to do is put your gun down. So again, this is an example of, it's important to learn to use a diaphragm, even though you may not have the utmost confidence in it. That's another example. So if you hear the difference in his gobble, again, we still can't see him. But just being able to hear, we can tell that he's pointed towards us. He's obviously getting closer. So everything's good in our world. We really don't need to do anything different. So the cameraman, he couldn't see the bird for a while. You'll notice on the where my gun barrel is, you're going to see a red circle pop up, and you'll see the bird moving through the brush. But the camera was picking him up before the cameraman actually saw him.
That's the closest gobbler I've ever killed. Wow.
So later in the video, I go to explain one thing that you always hear is don't shoot a gobbler in full strut. There's exceptions to the rule. So yeah, think about, we always pattern our shotguns at 25 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards. Well, what happens when you shoot it at 7 yards? You basically are shooting a pattern smaller than a golf ball. So that turkey, he was in full strut, but he was sideways to me, and his head was stable and not moving. If that gobbler was to come up out of strut and his head started moving around, then I'm basically trying to hit, a baseball size target with a golf ball or a ping pong size pattern. So for that situation, the best thing to do was take the shot when his head was not moving. Plus, it wasn't going to damage any other part of the bird. And literally, it gets pretty graphic towards the end of the hunt, because you actually go see. I mean, it basically took the top part of his head off, which is a very effective and a very humane kill. So that's why but running and gunning like that right there is, even if we didn't kill the bird, just to have that bird in that close and that encounter is what I love about the running, gunning, the calling, that game of chess. Hearing that gobbler come closer, that's my dream turkey hunt right there. So I've got Becky, you tell me, I've got another video that is an example of using decoys, and they're very nice, effective, high-end decoys, and the gobbler completely avoids them, and we end up harvesting the bird because the call brought the bird back to us, even though the decoys were not an effective tool. But you tell me if we have time to show that or what you want to do there.
Yeah, it looks like we still have about 30 folks with us.
Okay.
So we can keep going, and with this video here, as long as you're okay with it.
No, I'm good. Yeah. Let's see here. There we go. I thought I'd lost y'all again. It wasn't pulling up. Okay, here we go. So this is a hunt where my brother Clay and I were in Indiana, And I'm going to go ahead and there's several lessons in this video. One, we stood up where our hide was. So we stood the entire time. Bad idea, very uncomfortable. But let me get to, so this is an example of, we don't call while the bird's on the roost. We wait until well into fly down. And this video is a great video to watch because we do a lot of narration and explains our calling technique, when we change our technique, and what the gobbler's doing. So I'll go ahead and start it right here because I think we start explaining kind of what we're doing.
Our calling strategy for the morning was to do minimal calling and not call until well into fly down light. Our first series of calls did not result in the immediate response we were hoping for. A delayed gobble is normally not a good sign. Our second series of calls, however, resulted in the immediate response we're looking for. Things are looking much better. Our calling strategy has now changed to responding to his gobble with immediate hen sounds. When he gobbles, we want to respond with hen sounds so that he knows there's a hen over here and she's interested.
So you think about standing, you normally wouldn't think that it's that big of an issue, but it got very painful and very uncomfortable very quick, especially when the turkeys show up. Because then again, it goes back to the whole movement thing. You can't shift weight from one foot to another. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So this hen comes out. She comes and checks us out. We thought that she picked us out again because we're just standing there. And then this gobbler, when he finally does show himself, so there he is. The hen has already left the field. Okay, so she's no longer visible. He came because of, obviously this is where she came and he was hearing the calling, but we have two decoys out in front of us, which as soon as we got a visual on him, we did not call at all. So I'll go ahead and let the hunt play out. I'm going to fast forward just a little bit more because he really took his time coming in and he hung out for a while. But once we get right here, it kind of puts in perspective of where our decoys are. And we expected that bird to come right to the decoys, but that was not the case.
It's obvious he sees the decoys, but he's not coming in like we were hoping. He wants the hen to come to him, and he's avoiding a fight. Take notice to his body language. His head's up, and he's obviously looking and searching hard for the excited hen he heard previously that morning. It's obvious he's getting ready to move away from us, so we change strategy again. With camera in hand and diaphragm in my mouth, I decide to give him a series of hens when he's not focusing on us. My personal favorite time to call it a gobbler when he's in an open field is when his back is to us, or he's looking away, or immediately after a gobble. The idea is that he's disoriented immediately after a gobble and he cannot pick up on the exact location of the hen's house. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. It looks like we might actually be back in the game. Even though the gobbler is moving in our direction, he's obviously circling wide of the decoys. On this particular hunt, the decoys are doing us no favors. This bird is strictly hunting the call. This gobbler is now looking at a big pile of logs, an empty field, and no hen in sight. Chances are he's not coming any closer. Go get him, go get him, go get him. Nice, brother. Go get him. Go get him. Oh, he's smoked.
So I'll fast forward a little bit. The problem with looking through a camera is everything looks closer.
Way to go,
The
brother.
bird ended up being 57 yards away. If we knew he was actually that far, we probably wouldn't have shot. But again, that's why we use Indian Creek choke tubes and shoot Apex tungsten super shot. Sorry, I hope that video wasn't too long, but it's a good example that every situation's different. Sometimes those gobblers might come running right into the decoys, and we've had that happen a bunch of times. But in that particular case, and he was a mature bird. He had really long spurs, but he did not want to fight, and he wanted the hens to come to him. So if we did not have any decoys out, that hunt probably would have happened a lot quicker. I don't know, or it may not have happened at all. That's the excitement of turkey hunting. But so I've got one more, just real quick one. Let's see if I can pull it up. And this is an example again of, let's see. Let me find it real quick. So this is an example of a bird that, this was the hunt I was talking about where we had no gobbling whatsoever. The birds never gobbled. We actually hunted this bird the day before. We tried to run and gun, and he was not, when there's no vocalizations, it's really hard to hunt when you can't see them. So what we decided to do, this is my buddy Austin, we decided to go ahead and set a ground blind up in the middle of the field. And this is one of those ground blinds I was talking about where it's completely see-through. It's a mesh that you can see from the inside out, but you can't see from the outside in to a point. I'm still skeptic on if you had the sun at a certain angle, I still feel like they would be able to silhouette you in there. So we use them in overcast days or in some situations. But this is a hunt where they never gobbled. The hens, everything started filtering out to the field. And again, it just talks about how good a turkey's vision is, but yet how can you set up this ground blind right in the middle of the field and they pay no attention to it? Yes, they can see, yes, they can hear, but they don't process information the same as we do. So therefore, if they could smell, you would still be able to harvest them. So this is an example of worst case scenario. You've got a gobbler, and I literally lost count of how many hens were in this field. This was the second to the last day of the Indiana season. We didn't call it this bird because there's no use in calling. We had two hen decoys out, or no, I think we had one hen decoy out, but he's surrounded in hens. This is where patience comes into play. If we would have lost patience and started calling at him, it probably wouldn't have happened. So we just sat around, let it play out naturally, and luckily it worked out in our favor.
All we can do is sit back and watch him dance.
Two more birds enter the field. They are two of the four jakes we have seen in the area. Pardon the language. All right, so what's getting ready to happen here is you have a mature gobbler with a group of hens. These two jakes are juveniles. All right, so this gobbler is obviously the dominant bird, but one thing in turkey hunting is when you get multiple jakes, they turn into bullies. They're like a pack of dogs, and they will literally run mature gobblers off of hens. So in this situation right here, we literally thought that these two jakes were getting ready to run this gobbler completely off, but luckily we didn't call. He visually saw our hens and it worked out in our favor, but this is just an example of where juvenile birds can run off mature birds. They do it all the time. The two jakes pushing the gobbler off the hens just might be the motivation our boy needed to move in our direction.
How far out do you think he was there? 60, 45, 45. I can take him if I wanted to. I can take them if I wanted to. Let's let him get closer. What a show. Good job. What a show. Good job, buddy. Oh, Jake, don't mess with my bird. Oh, yeah.
All right, so that's the complete opposite of the hunt we just saw. The hunt before, the decoys were no use, and the bird searched out the call. In this situation, we never called. The bird came to the decoys. The ground blind was set up in the middle of the field. It worked out, but right there at the end, that bird picked out something. It could have been his gun barrel. There was some movement or something that that bird did not like, and he was literally getting ready to leave the area. But again, he didn't dart out like a jet. He took his time leaving, which led to his demise. But that's just another example. Every hunt is going to be different. So go in with an open mind of anything can happen. You never know. Sometimes you might have to call a bunch. Sometimes you don't call at all. But that's what I got, and I really appreciate y'all's time.
Wow, thank you so much. I really like the videos because they help me visualize. I'm a visual learner.
Mm-hmm.
And so seeing those hunting experiences, being able to take that in my memory bank with me to the field might motivate me to be a little more patient or, not call as much. So yeah, I really like those experiences. Thank you.
Absolutely. And these videos, again, you can watch the full hunts. I was trying to just skim through them to be as quickly as possible. But if you go to homegrownexperience.com or on the Homegrown Experience YouTube channel, we're going to be loading a lot more turkey hunts. There's also deer hunts and also on field proven calls. So we're going to continue. In fact, I plan on releasing another one probably this week. So just keep an eye on those channels and also our social media pages. We always give updates of content that's coming out.
Yeah, awesome. And I did put the YouTube channel in the chat for the participants. If you want to pull that from the chat, you can save the chat as a participant if you would like to do that. But thank you so much, Field. This has been awesome. The information has been excellent, and I'm just getting tons of comments in the chat that people found this so helpful, and they're so grateful for your time tonight.
Well, thank you all. I mean, I really appreciate every one of you all. If again, after this, if you all have any more questions, feel free to, you can call the Field Proven Calls shop, or you can ask me questions on our social media platform or whatever. I'm more than happy to help anybody out. And again, I don't care what call you run. I mean, it's just, I love seeing people getting into waterfowl hunting, turkey hunting, and just enjoying the outdoors.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. So this is only the second week of our 5-week Field to Fork webinar series. So don't forget to tune in next week. It'll be Wednesday, March 17th, the same time. We'll begin at 6:30. And that webinar is going to be on turkey processing and cooking. So our guest instructors are going to be Levi Burge, the agriculture agent in Henry County for the Cooperative Extension Services, and also Adam Huber, the ag agent in the Allen County Cooperative Extension Office. If you're tuning in on YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe to our channel and click the bell so you get reminders when we put up new content. And finally, if you didn't get your questions answered tonight, which for those of us that were here live, we definitely did. But if you have other questions that come up on April 6th, the Kentucky Afield TV Facebook is going to go live for a turkey call-in show. So mark your calendars for that and bring your questions with you. And with that, we will see you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you all.